If I asked you what the poorest large city in the US was, what would you say? Detroit? New Orleans? Jackson, Mississippi? All of those are reasonable guesses, but going by GDP per capita, it's the border city of McAllen, Texas. Of course, cities aren't the only places where poor people live. In reality, it's more common for poor people to not live in a city. And today, we'll focus just on that where poor people are concentrated the most, why they're so poor, and the implications their situation has on the rest of the country. Buckle up and get ready for stories about America's most neglected and forgotten people. In this video, we'll mention 5 rural areas, 2 urban areas, and a special case that remains a mystery. First, with the rural area, we're starting with the Native American reservations of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. This area is primarily centered around the massive Navajo Nation, which takes up a majority of this area. This area has a poverty rate of over 30%, which is 3 times the national average. It is anchored by the cities of Gallup, Farmington, and Tuba City. A history of relocation and colonization has left natives with little economic opportunity beyond mining and tourism, not to mention terrible land quality for any sort of agriculture. Next, we move to a slightly more predictable location, Detroit. Detroit has a similar poverty rate to the reservations of Arizona and New Mexico, roughly 30%. Although many Rust Belt cities have taken a hit due to the departure of key automotive and steel industries, Detroit is the hardest hit of them all. Detroit suffered most due to over-reliance on the auto industry, which mostly moves overseas for cheaper labor. The abundance of abandoned buildings and white flight also contributed to the lack of economic development in the city. Today, Detroit is slowly rebuilding as a new revitalization and diversification in the economy has allowed the primary African American population to escape poverty. Before we leave Detroit, don't forget to subscribe. Back to rural areas, we head back to the Native American reservations, this time in the Dakotas, primarily South Dakota. This is another story of hard-hit reservations subject to anti-Native policies that keep reservations in poverty. Remember, most Native Americans were either relocated across the country or forced onto the least desirable of the lands they owned. This region has the absolute poorest county in the US, Oglala Lakota County. Located on the Pine Ridge Reservation, here are a list of not fun facts about the county. It has the lowest life expectancy of any U.S. county at 66.8 years, similar to countries like Ethiopia or Pakistan. It has the highest poverty rate in the U.S. at 55.8% in 2022. And finally, it's the only county in South Dakota where the purchasing of alcohol is illegal because of the extreme drinking problem. Let's head down the Missouri and Mississippi River to the land of drive-through daiquiris, New Orleans. Besides famously being below sea level, the impact of Hurricane Katrina is still felt here. Many lots are abandoned after Katrina swept away houses, especially in minority neighborhoods. Although economic opportunities in trade and petrochemicals exist, the widespread pollution and health risks have further damaged New Orleans post-Katrina. You know your city is bad when part of the metro is called Cancer Alley. Not too far away is the Delta region, spanning Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. A majority African American area, the history of slavery and Jim Crow has impacted this area more than any other part of the South. The over-reliance on agriculture hurt this area once the Green Revolution brought agricultural mechanization and caused many people to lose their jobs. The largest cities in the area are Greenville and Vicksburg, both in Mississippi. A potential extension of this region to the east could include this stretch of counties in the northern coastal plain, agricultural counties also impacted by the Jim Crow era. Now we arrive to a spot mentioned more in the news than most, that being the US-Mexican border, specifically this populated part of the border in Texas, before the climate gets too dry for most people to live. This mostly Hispanic part of Texas is too far south to get as much economic development as the big cities of the Texas Triangle. With many of the residents here being first or second generation immigrants, many families here do not have any sort of generational wealth that can benefit job creation. With mostly low-paying jobs in the region, not much is going on here besides border drama and SpaceX launches. Let's not forget that McAllen from the beginning of the video is in this region. If you think that only minority-majority areas are poor, you'd be incorrect. Our next location is the white majority coal country in southeastern Kentucky, far northeastern Tennessee, far western Virginia, and southwestern West Virginia. After the US moved on from coal to oil, natural gas, and renewable energy, this area of the US was out of most of its jobs. Despite being near opposite to New Orleans in looks and culture, they both have a problem with flooding and pollution. This area has no cities above 10,000 people after Middlesboro, Kentucky fell under 10,000 people in the 2020 census. It's also important to mention the opioid crisis is the worst in this part of the United States. Before we get to this special case, now's a reminder that these areas are not poor because of a particular party's politics, so stop typing in the comments and pay attention to these voting maps of each area. If you're colorblind, the maps of both Democrat and Republican majority areas. And now, the special case, Puerto Rico. I know some of you watching this video forgot Puerto Rico was even a part of the US because of how little it's talked about. If it was a state, its 43% poverty rate would be more than double of any other state. Part of the problem with Puerto Rico is the reliance on imports, making everything more unaffordable for the average Joe. I guess in Puerto Rico's case, it would be the average one. Anyway, let's also not forget the outdated infrastructure in roads and electricity, made evident by Hurricane Maria in 2017. Congratulations, you've learned about America's forgotten communities. If you want to learn more about Coal Country, this video by Drew Binsky is a good watch. If you prefer my videos instead, here's a video about a geographic feature starting with each letter of the alphabet. Now get out of here.